So I had a bunch of resources over the years and many helpful resources that I just figured would be something I should make a video on, something I would be like, hey, this is all the stuff that you can use to help educate people about freedom, about truth, about everything that you want to share with the world. Now, at least it may not be something that you yourself may particularly want out there, but it's something I would hope you'd want out there, because the work and the resources that I try to put out there are meant to be universal and timeless, meant to spark at the root to everything that's going on, not just meant to look at the symptoms of what's going on, but get to the root. So if it doesn't just help you learn for yourself what that root is, it will help others as well. So if you are new to this, whether it's my content or whether it's these resources, let this be a guide to you and your efforts, not just in your truth, but your action. Okay, because these are two separate things that require a great amount of vigilance, a great amount of patience and time to understand, right? It took me time to understand things. I was like, wait, I had to break past these barriers in my mind to realize this is the truth and this is not. Or, oh, this I understand more now because I wasn't told this before. I was propagandized into knowing this before, but I didn't actually know it, or what have you, right? We have to look deeper at the situation. And people are skeptical, people want freedom, but they don't know how to achieve it. They don't know the roots to it. They can't even define simple, basic concepts like freedom or rights. And so when you have resources they can share with people and it's worded in certain ways, it can do a tremendous effort in the cause for what you're trying to achieve, in this case freedom, which I would hope is really important for you, because, you know, there's that quote I have at the back of my Slavery Gone for Good book, which is back there, which Mark Passio says that freedom is more important than life and property. It's more important because without freedom, life is not worth living. Without freedom, you have no property because, well, freedom is what invents everything. It allows the possibility for anything and everything. Freedom essentially provides solutions. It provides the ability to do anything. Otherwise, you have to get permission to do everything. You have to beg for everything. And anytime people are playing those political rituals that you see nowadays on TV or in our election system, that's what they're doing. They're playing the game. And so these brochures really hit at that mentality, which we would call statism, the belief that you should give away your rights, or the belief that somebody has the right to rule over your life and property other than you. It really hits at that and asks a lot of questions. Other materials over the past few years that I produced may be a little bit more complicated, but let's just go over some of these materials, right? I'm going to start with the two most important ones that I think could be helpful for people, which is the two brochures I've made thus far. One of these brochures I made in collaboration with Mason Gleason. Okay, Mason Gleason is a good friend of mine who's put out some good content. You know, he actually has a video presentation that I reposted on my channel, which was a simple introduction into natural law. The dude is also greatly into health and looking at raw animal products, for example. He has a great amount of wealth of detail for that. But he also teaches natural law and understands his concepts quite well. So what we did was we made a brochure and compiled a bunch of quotes from several different books. The Most Dangerous Superstition by Larkin Rose, Right as Might by Richard O'Wetherell, and The End of All Evil by Jeremy Locke in particular. Right, and we were thinking, well, could we use other books? Well, we picked these because we thought we liked the way it was worded. And so we would use those and find quotes, and I actually had my mother go through some of these quotes and pick which one she thought was good, because you have to have that third-party perspective to make sure things look good, and also for new eyes. Very, very important. So that's one brochure, and it says the only way to achieve freedom, so it really catches people's interest, and then maybe they'll look into those book sources and learn a lot more about the fundamentals to freedom. The other brochure is one that I recently created, which I think is really helpful because it asks a ton of questions. It's got the 7 questions by Brian Young, who's High Impact Flicks, who's somebody who I've been talking to lately quite a bit, somebody who I admire admire his works over the years, somebody who actually originally woke me up to a lot of this through these exact questions. I asked these questions to myself in 2016, and it broke me, because in politics, you never question morality. Well, in this case, I did, and it was really hard for me to break that mentality of statism for myself until I really sat down and thought about it. I'm like, oh shoot, wow, morality is important. You know, I was raised to be moral. We're generally raised to be moral and say, yeah, violence is wrong. Well, how come we excuse it in the name of authority? Can we give away rights to others that don't exist in nature? These very basic, simple questions can get you questioning a lot, right? Then there's also, within that same brochure, 5 questions by Larkin Rose, which are more detailed than that. These really break an individual, right? So the 7 questions by Brian Young, High Impact Flicks, are way more simple, way more basic, but the questions by Larkin Rose are quite a bit more complicated. And I also have other questions as well, like, can you limit slavery if everybody sees it's legitimate? Well, no, because then it's going to continue to grow. Same thing with violence. If everybody says, yeah, this violence is right to exist, well, then nobody's going to see it as violence. They're going to see it as a necessary justification, a necessary act of force for the common good, you know? But they're not going to see it like, oh, yeah, that's the same act as this person who we call a murderer. So why do we have to call it something else? Why do we think it's all moral? You know, and these are the questions we ask ourselves. Within this brochure, it also defines what a right is. And through very basic means, it also uses a Frederick Douglass quote, which I think is really important to help us define a right, because it's looking at the nature of the individual, which is where the rights come from. It comes from their very being, their ownership, the fact that I only breathe for me, you only breathe for you. A lot of people may describe morality in the sense of harm or behavior, and that's okay, because, you know, we express ourselves through our behavior, and that's how we show signs of ourselves. But even just looking at ourselves, the truth is self-evident. The evidence is found in thyself. I, again, can only breathe for me. You can only walk for you. That is ownership, and ownership thus gives way into property, into rights, and all rights are property rights if they belong with you, right? So these are really basic notions. It also goes slightly over the golden rule and has other quotes as well, natural law expressions, democide, which is a really core concept a lot of people don't know about, the #1 cause of unnatural death, and statistics, which, by the way, I can also give sources to. Professor Rummel gave a lot of the statistics on the democide section. And then there was another professor who is also greatly involved with the ideas of freedom. And he also had that quote about how there's 4 times more, than more death from government than from non-government or non-government murderers, which I think is an amazing statistic. I mean, just something that's mind-blowing. Everybody thinks government is here for security and securing our assets and protecting our rights. It's like, can somebody really do that? Like, I can defend somebody and their rights personally, but am I going to hire this huge gang that's minutes away who has this special title and badge and, you know, is going to presume themselves upon me and claim they represent me, and they have to follow laws which aren't written by me, but yet they're my servants? And it turns into this weird mess where it's like, is it really self-defense anymore, or is it just defense, not self-defense? External defense, enforcement, when it's like, well, aren't you supposed to defend yourself first and foremost? Are you supposed to be responsible for yourself? You know, for the moment that we say you're not responsible for yourself, well, what happens? You know, so these are questions, again, that you have to ask and you go deeper into. These brochures, especially that one I'm going over, I mean, this one, it's like, it's something that it's going to cause a lot of question, and I feel like people who are completely new to this information would have to reflect on it for a good amount of time, being completely new with it. So other than that, we have the website nita.one/share. This is a website where I created for a movement to help share the ideas of natural law and freedom and rights. So if you go to that web address, you'll see there's a flag, there's these brochures. You'll see there's business cards, quite literally a lot of great educational material, but also those materials don't just educate within itself, they lead to more educational material, which is the really important part. There's a lot of people who may do protests and all sorts of things, but they forget that where's that protest going to lead them? Is it going to do anything? It's like all these people have all set up these huge events, right? Like, we're going to educate people and we're going to make sure that the public knows about this event and knows about the truth. But where does it lead the people? Does it lead them to do anything? Does it lead the people to actually create change? Do they know what to do with it? Is it enough to amplify the voices? So that's why I created a movement. There's a lot of reasons why. If you're interested, I have a video. It says, must see the 4 steps to total freedom. And it goes deep into what we need to do to achieve our freedom. And within that process is number 2, education, and number 1, representation, which has to do with these materials, right? If you are having a flag or a shared symbolism across these materials, that counts as number 1, representation. I represent this movement. I'm part of this, and other people are part of it. We see the same thing. And that material also leads to more education, but there's education on that material, which sparks the interest on the representation. Meaning, the flag represents an idea. That idea has education behind it. Otherwise, it's not really a good idea, is it? Right? The idea always has information behind it. Movements are based on ideas. So therefore, movements should be based on education. And movements, if they are a movement, have to have people involved. So that's why sharing materials like this could be super helpful. Having flyers as well. I create flyers on that webpage you'll find as well. Some of it also has questions that could be helpful. They also have some flags that people could be familiar with, or flags that people would just question in general. Using anything that's sort of different from the normal symbolism would get people questioning, which is what we need if we want a different reality. I also have a bunch of sheets on nita.one/sheets, okay, where there's a dictionary of different terms related to natural law. I made this several years ago. It may not be the best for everybody, and it may not be wholly complete because it was back then, but somebody can take it and work on it more if they want to. And there's also different other sheets on there. At the top, particularly, you see really important ones, such as the 3 facts sheet. Okay, this has 3 facts that a lot of people don't know about. Again, going over government, the nature of government, democide, and morality. And then you have how slavery still exists, which goes deep into abolitionism and the fact that we're not paying attention to the fact slavery might still exist, and looking at its history and its forms, how we define it, and questions that were similarly on the brochures we mentioned earlier. And even the government is slavery flyer within itself, just straight up, government is slavery as a flyer is a very powerful message, because a lot of people are going to look at that and say, well, what are you talking about? But then they start reading it and say, well, wait. You can break down the term government, you can look at the nature of what it does, its actions, the mentalities of the people involved, and you say, you know what, this does affirm that statement. It does start to make sense, right? In reality, it's just people, but those people are participating in certain acts which are considered acts of slavery and conditions that enslave all of humankind. Enslavement, out of enslaving. Okay, so if you're also curious about that, Aaron Butler and myself started a series called Abolitionism 101. It doesn't really have an exact title, but we'll call it that. And you can find it at nita.one/series. And you'll see we go through step by step every topic mentioned about freedom, defining concepts, everything from chaos to rights to slavery to ownership to property, the very basic essentials defined for people in like 5 minutes or so, right, per video. Some go slightly longer or shorter depending on what we to talk about. And if you can just watch one of those videos per day, that's a good milestone. If you want to educate yourself about freedom, is to just watch one of those videos every single day. You just go to nita.one/series, right? And you just watch one of those videos every single day and read along with us, because what we do is we read alongside my book, Slavery Gone for Good. So if you have that in person, you can read along with us. Otherwise, you'll get all the information from the videos. There's no problem with that. This information is done out of my moral obligation, right? So I want to share it with as many people as possible. Other resources would include the playlist I created on YouTube, and I could create them on other platforms, but there's too many other platforms to have to do, and I have a lot of videos. But I would recommend looking at my playlist. They could help, right? And of course, I also have other sheets as well. If you go to nita.one/advanced, which you get there through the main page, by the way, you can look, I have about, let's see, 12 summary sheets, right? And each one goes over every single topic on natural law, but there's only 12 sheets, right? So it's like, well, how could you summarize natural law, everything about natural law, in 12 sheets? Well, guess what? I did. And I did that also like 2 years ago. So be sure to check that out, because those could be super helpful. They're color coded, and I think they catch people's attention. I even laminated them in person so I could bring them with me in my backpack when I go to places and share with people, put them on tables, etc. Right? But you could also print them up en masse and also hand them out if you so wish to do so. Okay, so my must-see videos are usually more important. You know, there's a reason why I say must-see on some of my videos. One of my playlists is straight up titled Resources, so that can help too, helpful resources. So that can help. You know, there's also an action playlist on YouTube, so that one is also really useful for this information. Also, a quick update on my website. I was sending out flags overseas, across the country, and it was costing me quite a bit of money. And keep in mind, I don't really ask for money on any of this stuff, any of this content, but I figured even the flags are not the best way to bring this information to people. I thought, well, it's not only cheaper but better and catches people's more attention, and they can do a lot more with it if I do stickers instead. So I can send out stickers to anybody who requests it. Just go again to nita.one, and you'll see there's a share button. And when you go to share, there's a little form you could fill out, and if you want, provide a P.O. box if you don't want to provide your own address, and I will send you stickers that go alongside the Nature is the Answer movement that I created to share the ideas of natural law and abolitionism, of course, because that's the topics I talk about. Abolishing that which does not belong, abolishing slavery that still exists to this day, right? So if we can understand that, then yeah, we're going to hold true on that. Now, aside from this, I do have a shirt store. I just don't advertise it with people, but I figured I would put it in this video since we're talking about resources. And it does get shared with people who have my book, because there's a link at the back that says, hey, you know, you can check out these shirts if you want to share this message. A bit more with people could help, right? And I found out, yeah, shirts can probably help with people and starting the conversation. So I create some shirts. They're not all that fancy, but they're basic. You know, I am an abolitionist. Government is slavery. Research this. Free by nature. Slaves by government. Stuff like that. Learn more, you know. Define slavery, create freedom, all these different mottos I put on shirts. And you can feel free to check it out, you know, even just the one that says research would be quite interesting, because some people might actually research it. They might be interested, and, you know, saying like, hey, I have information you must know. You know, there's information that you need to know. I know how we can create freedom now. Just talk to me. You know, conversation starter shirts don't hurt. And there's a lot of people who put out a lot of great shirts out there. So that's why I don't usually like make myself out to be the shirt person. Same thing with news content, right? I used to do a lot of health news on my channel, but there's a ton of people who put out a ton of great content about that. I'm here to do something different. I'm here to deliver what needs to be delivered, and as far as I see right now, that's action. And so if I can encourage you to do that on your own, great. You know, I'm doing what I can. But there is an action page on that website as well. Nature is the Answer, of course, because there's a learn button and an action button, not just a share button. And so I encourage you to check it out. If you haven't been to the website in a while, I do encourage checking it out, because I've made updates to it for accessibility, meaning having these two buttons make it really easy, because now everything you need is there. You know, you don't have to go navigate 100 different buttons at a time. No, it's like action. Okay, here's all the action resources. Learn, here's all the learning resources. You learn about the movement. You learn about what the movement is trying to achieve with its education. It's really simple, right? And if you have any questions, of course, you can still reach out to me. And if you want to start up, you know, something in your local neighborhood and you need a lot of resources, I can maybe help you with that. You know, we need to work together and make sure this message gets out to people. And I'm afraid, I think, you know, and I've held this for a long time, this firm belief of, well, I wouldn't call it belief, but knowledge that a movement is ultimately necessary, in my view. I think it's necessary to not only show the numbers that we talk about, but to create that and to maintain it over time and through history, to say this is what we've done. You can tell humans have this affinity for symbols and art, and it greatly appeals to them. And if you can represent nature itself, the most universal and timeless thing, I think you got a very powerful message on your hand. You know, and you're not just looking at one symptom, you're looking at the whole, which is also the root. Funny enough. right? So also be sure to network with the Common Law Assembly. Of course, I have many projects like the Summit and the newspaper. The newspaper I would encourage everybody to get involved with, because you can work on an article for weeks at a time. Check out my videos about that. But the newspaper and the Summit and my Know Your Rights project, I mean, all this stuff, and then I'm creating campaigns and networking in real life. I mean, I hope you can do the same thing and get the message out. For thumbnails on my channel, I use Photoscape X. So if you're a content creator out there and you're like, man, you know, I like his thumbnails, or I want to do something more professional, I keep it very simple, right? My thumbnails are not like the best. I do them myself, but I think it does look a little bit better, you know, having some level of professionalism involved, and for me it works. It's free, completely free. You could pay for it, but Photoscape X, you can get it on Windows or Mac, and I'm pretty sure you can get it on other platforms too. It's not a big deal, but you can easily get it, Photoscape X, okay? Now for editing, video editing, I use Filmora X, okay, or for Filmora 10 to be short, but I use that as for my video editing because I think it's super easy as well. Like, I use very basic tools. I'm not using some fancy, like, you know, studio suite to edit my videos. Now I could and learn how to do that, and if you do, that's fantastic. But that is like very basic, and anybody I think can use that. I've talked with many different people, and they like that video editor because of how simple it is. So I would recommend that. When it comes to an Office program, I would highly recommend only Office because it does everything you want, and it can also sync right to the cloud. Way better than Microsoft Office or other mainstream platforms. And it's, of course, a bit more decentralized. And Google Slides is not as decentralized, but it's also a very good platform. I would say Google has some generally pretty good products compared to, say, Apple. Because they usually work pretty darn well, and they also sync right to the cloud, so you don't have to worry about losing things. Because trust me, there's been times I've lost things, and it's like, yeah, you can't get that back. So very important that you use really good Office programs, because if you're writing articles for the newspaper or you're working on a presentation, you want to have those as your resources, okay? Now, when you do an interview, you can clip, you can use shorts, YouTube shorts, you know, hashtag shorts, and making sure it's under 1 minute and it's vertical. You can use every platform to your benefit. The truth is the truth, you know. There's people who at first said, well, why are you on YouTube? It's like, because how'd you find out about the alternative platforms in the first place? Probably through the mainstream. You know, you have to spread the message of truth everywhere. It doesn't matter where it is, okay? Especially if it's about universal timeless principles. It's like, get it out everywhere, man. That's what we have to do. And so if you do an interview, chop it up, you know, you have endless content. Just don't forget, you can put out something every day using shorts. Really simple. I use a website called crossclip.com, which allows you to put in a YouTube clip, which you individually clip on YouTube. You take that link, then you put it into CrossClip, and then you can upload it automatically to either TikTok or download it and put it back on YouTube as a short. Okay, so that's how that works. Now, if I'm going too fast through this list, well, be sure to rewind, because I don't want to make this video as long as it already is. You can do a Mark Passio or Anna Von Reitz or Edward Griffin clips channel, right? I mean, these people don't always have their own channel, or they don't put out content all the time. So it'd be important to maybe make clips for them, or to help their message get out there, especially since they put out so much information over the years. It's like, why hasn't anybody made an archive really detailing and showing all their stuff? That's something you can definitely do. That's just one idea, though. You know, you can narrate video scripts that you write up, and boom, you got videos. You can put images on top. It's professional. You can spend as much time as you need to make that work. You can start a podcast. You know, a lot of people like to start with interviews or podcasts. I think video scripts are even better, because you can focus on something. You can make sure it's orderly perfectly. You can have nice images, but you can do the same thing with a podcast if you want. It's just, everybody's got a podcast. It's a little bit less niche. And interviews, the same thing. Unless somebody really knows them, people already know them, don't expect to necessarily get new listeners. I think video scripts can do a pretty good job for new beginners. People always leave that option out, but all of those options are, of course, great. And I would encourage people expand their options to try everything and experiment, see what they like the most. And you don't have to produce video content. You can do other things. That's why I have the newspaper project as just as an example, where you can start writing stuff. You know, anything. It doesn't have to be more than 100 words. I mean, really simple stuff, guys. You can do a duo project, work with somebody else. If you're afraid of talking to the camera or trying to get your voice out there, at first it can seem a little weird, especially for me. I'm all about nature is the answer. It's like, I'm talking to a camera, I'm talking to myself on a screen. What is this, right? But you get used to it and you practice. Practice makes perfect. You really have to practice. And so if you do it with somebody else, that can also help motivate you and give you more content. You don't want to become too reliant on having somebody else necessarily with you, but it does help, and it helps with the audience, and it helps with the engagement. It helps with the conversation, filling in the missing holes. Even just collaborative projects too can work, okay? I hope that in my newspaper too, people would want to collaborate on different articles. That can also happen. You can do skits, whether it's funny skits or serious skits and symbolic skits, right? Or music skits. People on TikTok do all these weird dancing and trends. It's like, or you can do, comedy skits like, oh, this guy walks over to the street and starts paving the street, and then this guy is like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, I'm working on the street. I'm building the roads. And he's like, well, why are you building the roads? The government does that. He's like, okay, but isn't the government us? Like, we're the people, so we got to build the roads. And the guy's like, well, no, we employ the government. They're our business. They're the people we employ. And then the guy on the road is like, well, what do you mean? I mean, yeah, we employ them, but I didn't employ them. I don't consent to that. I'm going to build my own roads because I want my roads, and they're not getting it done. There's potholes all over the road. And the guy's like, well, I appreciate you for doing that. Have fun with that. I'm going to continue doing my thing. And then the guy's like, of course, he's not going to help me build the road. He's just going to rely on his government to do it for him. And then the government gets involved and they say, what are you doing on our roads? And I say, and then the guy says, well, I'm working on the road. And then, he gets arrested by the cops, and the neighbor comes back out and he's like, yeah, get him. Because the government is the moral people. Like, all sorts of weird skits, right? I've scripted things like this. I just don't have the actors or the people, the resources currently to do that, even though I'm networking with a bunch of people. In time, guys. In time. All right? You can even make it an animation if you want. All right? Share what you've watched or learned each week. That works too, and it helps you relearn the stuff and keep it in memory. Having a family or having somebody to talk to is important when it comes to memory, right? I didn't have to watch Mark Pastio's Natural Law Seminar more than once to have to understand it, because it just synced with my brain. I really understood it, and I relayed that information back to myself many times to make all these sheets and different documents, and looking over the slides and then making my own slides, make my own presentations. And so I was able to relearn and memorize things and get a deeper scope as to what these things represent, right? And it's important to always reflect back on your own conscience and say, well, is there another way of looking at it at the same time? But having a relay is good. So if you even want to just make a video channel going over stuff you've learned, that could be really helpful, because now you're not just putting out one thing, you're putting out everything you learn each week, and sort of like a recap. A lot of people put out recap type of content, or they compile clips in particular clips that they've seen over the week, and they turn that into a separate video itself each week. So I mean, just everything I mentioned so far should be plenty enough to make your own content, and you don't even have to show yourself for half of those ideas, okay? So if you're paranoid or you're like, oh, I can't do it, you're just making excuses, okay? You can do something. 1 minute clips, come on. They're doing great on my channel. I mean, people are going to be more likely to watch something that's under a minute than they are watching this video, which is nearly 30 minutes by now, right? Just to go over all these different tips and methodologies. But I know the people who will watch this are the people who want those methodologies. So that's why I make it, and just produce out of your heart. Don't try to become an identity like, oh, people like me because of this or that. Like, no, be you, okay? Once you start playing into that identity, you fell for the trap, and you don't want to be there. Okay. Anyways, you can do plenty of things. You can write articles. I'll turn them into videos for you. That's if you get involved in a newspaper project. And listen, I've made many different projects over the years. I even made a seminar that's over 24 hours with clips hours and hours of content I still haven't published on my channel that I have, right? For this presentation that I called Nature is the Answer in Natural Law, right? And you can find it on my channel right now, but you'll see it's like, this is way too much detail. Why'd you do it, Corey? It's like, I don't know, because I said, hey, the future generations will look at it. I know nobody's going to really watch it now, but Either way, it helps your own learning, it helps your own truth discovery, and you just produce out of your heart, see what comes, you see what you have to change, you interact with people, and you gain more experience as to what you need to do, rather than just going out there and making judgments and making base statements and saying, well, the people are never learning, when you're not putting out the action yourself. You have to do something. You can't just be sitting around complaining all the time. You have to actually do something. That is the measure of how much you care. Otherwise, I can't really say you care. It's the same thing. It's like, well, how do you prove ownership? Well, you got to take care of your body. That's how you prove that you own yourself, because you're owning up to your ownership. Otherwise, I can't really say that you are in ownership of yourself, because you clearly seem like you don't take care of yourself. Now, if you try your best and you're open about your experiences, if you're having a really hard time, then that shows authenticity to me. That shows ownership, because now you're owning up to your situation, not just owning up to, what you're trying to do. So transparency, honesty, always important. Don't forget it in this process. And so if you have any questions and you want any information or any help with content creation, I'm here for you. Be sure to check out all the resources. I have a separate video, how to share abolitionism, that goes particularly into that topic, that you can look into. And of course, I have other videos over the years you could check out, but I think I covered most of the basics that you would need to go out and do something. Thank you very much for watching. This is Corey Angelot. Nature is the answer.